Hey, everybody. So I'm back with Jen Speidel, my neighbor, my friend, my coworker, my partner in crime sometimes. We just realized she has the distinct honor of being my most frequent guest so far. This is visit number 3. Jen and I have talked about a thrift store and a thrifting initiative at the high school. We've talked about the Red Dot Project, which is a district-wide, well, school-wide project around making sure girls at school have all the feminine hygiene products they need, along with a million other things. Today, we're talking to a new version of Jen as published author. So, yay! And Jen joins a unique group of New Hampshire citizens who are published authors, regular people writing books. Tell me a little bit the name of your book, what got you to write it. Just tell me the story of your story.
Sure. So the book is called Lady Justice and the Sisterhood of the Crones. And there's a couple things that sort of lead up to this of me wanting to write it. So the first part of that is having read Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale and then the Testaments. So there was a part in the Testaments where the women are sort of stripped of all of their credentials. Some significant characters were lawyers and justices that's been stripped. And in my head, I thought, what would that be like if that happened to men? That was sort of rattling around in my brain. And around the same time, I had read The Chains by Kirsten Miller. That was about women hitting menopause and sort of not caring about what they said and what they did and just doing what was right. And they protected some young women in that book. These older women came together. And when I say older, I'm talking 50s, 60s. We're not talking 90-year-olds. Yeah, right. And then the other book was, again, Margaret Atwood. And if you haven't listened to her books, her nonfiction books, they're hilarious. She just has the funniest wit. And that was Burning Questions. And she was talking about a conference that she did at some point in her career where they had established writers and professors and they invited young women to come in, and it was a conference. So it was set up to be a mentoring experience. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea. So those three things together were the foundation for Lady Justice. The term crone, so having sort of stumbled into my crone phase myself,
Yeah.
where my kids are grown up, I'm an empty nester, and I've noticed that I have less focus on doing what society wants me to do, more outspoken, just doing what's right.
Mhm.
And that's where the premise sort of came from. And the third thing was we seem to have a lot of politicians who get away with a lot of things. And I remember saying to someone, it's if they have sold their soul to a crossroads demon. And that's why they're not getting in trouble.
Right.
And that's when Maven was born, the crossroads demon.
Yeah.
So the book is about Maven and her journey from, doing these questionably gray moral things
Yeah.
to deciding that the world was just so unjust that what more could she get from these people and wanted to fix it. So,
That's a lot.
yes.
So as a very, very, my head is, usually full and spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour. In some ways, very connected events when you put them all together. But
Mhm.
from reading a book to listening to a different book to finding out about a conference to having a personal experience, like those are all very separate things, but
Mhm.
clearly connected in your head because they stayed together,
Yeah.
one building on the other, it sort of sounds like.
Mhm.
Right. When I wrote Motherland, I had help. I hired an author to sort of ghostwrite it for me. What ended up happening was I dictated my story and she
Mhm.
transcribed the story and then we edited it together so that it was accurate and sounded like me. And I don't know that I would have had the organizational fortitude to do all of that myself. That's where I struggle. I can sit down and write a 1,100 word article in one try and I don't need
Mhm.
to rewrite it or anything like that. I can do. But to really organize a story from beginning to end and in the pre-story and the post-story and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So you have this idea. Maven is born. You have a character in your head or in your heart that you want to develop. What were your next steps?
One of the things that I've said throughout my life is a lot of harm is done with the word tradition.
So I don't do
We
them anymore since Molly died. I'm
Yeah,
done.
we have traditions that when you ask somebody, well, why are you doing that? And they say, well, it's tradition. A lot of times tradition leaves out a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I started with the titles of the chapters. One of them was tradition is a four-letter word because in my experience in lots of different areas of my life, there's been a tradition that has excluded me or excluded a group. I went through and did all of the titles. And then from there, I flushed out what was going on with the women. Once the idea of Mavon came along, I needed someone. So it's a heroine's journey, which, if you don't know the difference between a hero and a heroine pulls people in. She is looking for a community to accomplish a goal. Where the hero, he's got his call to action, he has his mentor, he defeats the villain,
Right.
and then he's by himself. He doesn't end up in a
Yes.
community.
He's like up on that pedestal and
Right.
over there. Yeah.
Yeah. But a heroine builds a larger community, and it's for the good of all.
Right.
So she had to have this journey, but where she was morally gray, she needed some help. And that's where Buluku came from. And Buluku is a traditional goddess of matriarchy. She's the catalyst besides Maven's encounter with this unfortunate man who is the first one to be cursed. And from there, the curse is sent out sort of into the universe of anybody who has hate in their heart for women would only see any woman that they look at, young girl, teenager, as an old crone. With the power of the crone, the wisdom of the crone, the curse itself takes out a lot of societal issues that we have, pedophiles and rapists, because what we see is that sometimes men are more interested in the younger female
Right.
body
Very
and
much. Yeah.
face, and not so much, when you turn 50 and 60.
Yeah.
And then from there, I had to do something with what was going on. They called the Crones to Peaks Island, which is a place that I go to fairly frequently. And it's just a magical island in Maine where, because we often go when it's not tourist season, we get to interact with the locals. And there's so many women there that are artistic and community minded. And it's just a wonderful place to be. So that it had to be on Peaks Island,
Yep. Yeah.
where all of these women show up.
They don't necessarily live there. They end up there.
Right, they're called. So if you think about our intuition that I'm a big believer in, Buluku put out that call to female intuition. For those who were in that crone phase of their life, not the mother and the maiden, they felt compelled to come to Peaks Island. They weren't sure why, but they just knew that they had to be there. So they show up, and in the meantime, they sort of prep the island where there obviously are men on the island. Those who showed symptoms of having the curse, they put them on the ferry. They originally put them in hospitals where they weren't going to encounter women. But that was a big problem for me because the idea of making somebody other and putting them away was just really wasn't a place I wanted to go to.
Well, we being, in our society, women, we can't fight for being othered and put away and then do that to others.
Right.
I see so much of that in current political back and forth, both sides of every issue. In my mind, I feel like I'm on the playground at recess, and both sides are behaving the same way. They just want to prove that their side is right. So it's okay for me to do it because what I'm promoting is the right. And then, of course, the other person says that they're right. And so did that sort of thought come to you in the process of developing the character? And yeah.
Absolutely. So the way I dealt with it is the women talk about it. How can we make these men contributing members to society?
Right.
How do we teach them that relationships aren't quid pro quo? That you can build a relationship that doesn't have to do with sex, that doesn't have to do with money, just for the sense of having a relationship.
Right.
And that's what the women, they come together and enjoy each other's company. There's a lot of laughter in this book through friendship, and they want to help men to have that as well for those that have been cursed.
Right.
And then for those who haven't, it's an opportunity for them to sort of step up. So like what we saw with the hockey debacle, if just one guy had said, this isn't cool. These women won a gold medal and
they've won several,
but no one spoke up. And we know that's a phenomenon that happens in groups of men, groups of people where they don't want to be the one that's ridiculed, so they don't speak up. So this is an opportunity for the men who don't have hate in their heart for women, that see women as just another human being, to take roles in power, to be an ally to women.
Yeah.
And that does happen. So there are several men on the island who are allies. There are several maidens that help to make this successful.
Right. This reminds me of two things. Everything's on social media now. It's like a reel, and it talks about the patriarchy as being a boot on the throat of a woman. So in all the different roles of people, so you have the people who are like the men who say, well, that's awful. I would never put my foot on the throat of a woman, but they don't ask the others to take the boot off. And then you have like the women who say, I have no trouble with a boot on my throat, because they're caught up into the traditional roles of where they belong. And then there's, well, I know it's wrong, but I'm not going to say anything. But at the end of the whole reel, the boot remains on the throat, like it never comes off the throat. There's no support for that. The other thing that came to mind was a study that was done. A group of women interviewed serial killers, and they wanted to know their stories to try to develop patterns. And what they ended up with was very disjointed, ego-driven stories from these serial killers about their crimes. And when they were trying to tabulate the data, a scientist that was involved in it said, why didn't you ask about the victims? Like, why didn't you interview who the victims were? Go to the victims' families. You learn nothing about why a serial killer, they said they killed her because they were mad, but why her?
Right.
Like, so again, the women become passive participants in the act of violence against them. Does that make sense?
It
Which
does,
sort
absolutely.
of, which sort of sounds, this is what comes to mind for me in this sort of analogy with the allies and the men getting the evil out of their hearts so that they can actually support women and not just be the good guy, but not do anything about the bad guy.
Right.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. One other thing comes up for me. I remember like Marlo Thomas and Gloria Steinem in the beginning of Women's Lib. I was like 6 or 7. And the whole thing was driven on women trying to prove they were as good as men. And I feel like women got sucked into thinking that's how they would be equal, to show they deserved it by using men as the standard. And I feel like it's biting us in the ass now. Like,
Yeah.
why didn't we insist that men prove they're as good as us?
Right.
Like why did I have to take off my bra, or I like my bra, or why did I have to agree that having a baby and being a stay-at-home mother for a while was some insult to me? It's a miraculous thing, but I bought into it. No, you take care of the baby, I'm going to go work. And now the baby becomes the sign of failure or inadequacy,
Right.
as opposed to who's the parent doing the most. And you have the revelations in your head. You develop a storyline through titles of chapters. Each chapter is likely a story. You have character development. So, how did you create the specifics? What's like the sort of the day-to-day of the storyline?
So it's present day. When I wrote it, it was before our current election. So in the story itself, it's before an election.
Right.
And one of the things that happens is the candidates that were set to be in place, they are taken out of the picture. So then the parties have to figure out who they want to put up as a candidate. And they both choose women, and both women choose female vice presidents. At one point, I have them get together and they talk about, all of the failings in our system. So, for instance, one of the things they do is they decide they're going to debate the issues on like a podcast and then have them available so that everybody can watch them. So, if you working at night, you can go in and click on an issue and see where each person stands so that it's really, you vote for the issue, not the
Yes.
party.
Yeah.
So it really looks at reforming our democracy to make it more equitable.
Right.
So it's not about equality, it's about everybody getting what they need so that the
Right.
family that's working 3 jobs can still access the information
Right.
in a way that's simple and right there.
And free.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
free.
right.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things of podcasting is, oftentimes people say, oh, you should try to monetize. Well, yeah, maybe I should try to monetize, but why should somebody pay for what I have to say? And I mean, people do need to make money, but there are times when I wish that's how things were. I wish it was much less spun on the political belief of the TV station or the news outlet, all that aspect that goes into it. Did you sort of sit down and write it, or was it a chapter here and there and a few months go by and a chapter here and there? Like what was the actual writing like for you?
So it happened over the course of the summer. As I'm a teacher and I don't work during the summer, I need that time to sort of put my brain,
Yeah.
get back to baseline before I
Yeah.
start a new school year. So it just kind of all came out over the course of the summer. And then Beth York, who is a former teacher at
Yeah, I
Concord
love
High, she
her.
retired
Yeah.
a couple years ago.
Yeah.
She was an English teacher for many, many years, and she was my editor. So she went through and did the beta reading and asked questions and gave me feedback. And I went in and filled in each of those chapters. So it was written over the summer, but it took another 6 months to really flush it out.
Oh,
And
that's the hard part. Getting the story to print isn't the hard part. It's the editing process. I know with Motherland, I had to remove all the medical malpractice stuff. I had to tell the whole story. You're probably this way too. You have to tell the whole story.
Yep.
You can take things out. You can't tell a part story and fill things in. It has to
Right.
be all of it. And then you can edit out parts or rearrange parts and that sort of thing. So the editing process was the hardest part for me. It was exhausting. It made me cry most of the time. Now, I was editing the story of my daughter's death, so obviously there's an emotion to it that you might not have had. But I imagine when you've spent hours crafting a character and a chunk of a chapter just doesn't make sense and you have to take it away.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
On this one, it wasn't quite so hard. I have a second one that's not a sequel, but just a different story that I wrote last summer, where I was thinking about killing off a main character, and I actually did it. And then I was like, I need to fix that. And I ended up revising it and
Yeah,
it
yeah,
didn't kill her. But yeah, because these characters, like I wanted to be friends with this group of women.
yeah.
You know,
Right.
they had a fantastic time on the island together. They were supportive. As different as they all were, they had lots of commonalities
Right,
just from being in the same generation,
right.
where music and experiences that they had, it was fun. It was really fun to write these women. Because it was my first go around, there was more that needed to be put in
Right.
than what needed to come out.
Oh,
Um,
well, that makes sense. Right, because
mhm.
you've got the story in your head, so it's easy to write it without putting enough back information in because you know it. So you write a
Right.
sentence like, and someone's like, "Well, so what does this sentence mean?" Oh, right, I didn't talk about that's tricky. If you had to give it a genre, is it just essentially nonfiction? I mean, fiction?
It's really hard. And it's funny because on the back, it says adult fiction and fantasy. So I'll pull up.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here's the book. And I love, love, love the model that they used
Yeah,
on
me
the
too.
cover
Yep.
because she really has that look on her face like she can take on the world.
Yeah, it's
She
like
got,
try me.
yeah,
That's
she's
what I
got
think
kind
of
of
when I
like a
see it.
snark in
Yeah,
her
yeah,
smile. So it wasn't what I envisioned at all for the cover, but once it
yeah,
came in, I was like, oh, I love this.
yeah, yeah.
So the other books that I talked about, The Testaments, The Change, The Woman of Wild Hill, which is also Kirsten Miller, and then the other one I forgot was When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. That book just blew my mind.
I need to read all these books.
Yes, it's so amazing. And it's set in the 50s, and women are just suppressing everything about who they are. And eventually they combust and become dragons. It's just an amazing story. All of those are women's midlife paranormal fiction.
Got it.
And that's what I was aiming for, but I
Yeah,
don't know that my book is paranormal. There is a component of magic realism in there, but it's not paranormal. We have a goddess and a crossroads demon working together. So in that sense, maybe. So it's
so
fantasy.
maybe supernatural a little bit, but
Yeah,
not paranormal. No, yeah,
right.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
lot of categories out
yeah.
there. How do you say when something's a fan? When I think of fantasy, I think of, Harry Potter is a
Right,
fantasy.
right, right.
This isn't that. So
No, no, I wouldn't think so either. I wouldn't think fantasy. I would think more paranormal or
yeah,
supernatural a little bit,
yeah.
where you're communicating telepathically or intellectually or
Right.
spiritually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And definitely my audience is women in their midlife, written by midlife for women of midlife.
yep,
It's our stories that get washed away
right,
because we're older. But from my perspective, and I built this into all the characters, we're as intelligent as we're ever going to be, we're as educated as we're ever going to be. We are, at least in my scenario, I feel like I'm at a point where I'm comfortable in our situation as far as money and our home and in my relationships. I don't feel that I need to please anybody or change myself in any way to build relationships or interactions. And those are the women that are in the book.
right. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. So I did a podcast episode a couple years ago on menopause. So, like in Japan, there's no word for hot flash because menopausal women in Japan don't get hot flashes. And it's because lots of communities, indigenous communities that are in the woods or, away from cities or still practicing a lifestyle over generations. The role of the female-bodied human is honored and revered, and menopause is pause of menstruation. One community stood out. The whole thought was that every time a woman menstruated, she was out of her body was coming all of the knowledge and wonder and magic that would have gone into growing a child.
Mm.
So in the menstrual blood was this incredible amount of power. And so when a woman stopped having her period, the belief is that now she keeps all that. Like she's not
Yep.
bleeding away her power anymore to create another human. What she's doing now is keeping it. And these women become really revered in their communities. And they're the ones that people are sent to for advice. They're the ones that sit at the table. In many of these communities, women have as much power at the head of a tribe or a community or a group as the men. So you're midlife. So a lot of midlife women are going through the change and navigating what it's like to no longer be looking better as the years go by, maybe, and going through all those things. Women are one of like three, humans are one of like three mammals that have a long life after they're no longer fertile. They have lots and lots of years where they don't reproduce and they don't die. And
Mhm.
they're revered, even in the animal communities. Those members of the herds or the prides or the whatever are the revered members that others sort of bow down to. Humanity wants men to be in charge of everything, so I think we just get this idea. But that menopause episode for me really taught me sort of how backwards it is. That what are we thinking? Even the word crone, it can be used as an insult, right?
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, except, do you know what it takes to be a crone?
Right.
Right,
Right. And it's the third phase of our lives, the maid and
right,
the mother and the crone. It's not supposed to be a bad thing. And that's one of the things that I've sort of embraced. There is a phenomenal photographer in Maine called Ruby Jean, and she does a project called the Goddess Project. And she goes into nursing homes. She fundraises so that she can go and visit an older woman. And she takes these phenomenal pictures. And you see the beauty
right. In
in
the
a
aging.
90-year-old woman.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Familiar
not
with her, actually.
Yep. It's not your traditional beauty
No,
by the patriarchal standards,
right.
but the women are gorgeous.
Yeah,
And their light shines through.
yeah.
So with their gray hair and their wrinkles, it's just so wonderful. So one of the things that like I like that my hair is coming in gray. I have highlights that I never had. It's just a change.
Right.
So
I'm in my new gray now. This has only been like 6 months.
mhm,
I was growing it out and then I finally just chopped it all off. So this
yeah.
is very gray. This not so much. So we'll see. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've gotten good feedback and I'm 62. So have I moved out of the crone phase? Like, what am I now?
No, so it's our last phase of our
Okay.
lives.
So three.
And
Yeah. So
right.
maiden, mother, crone.
In
Yeah.
Crone. When this archetype started, we probably only lived to, 35.
Right.
So those phases were pretty quick. Now that we're living longer and longer,
Right.
that crone phase, it's after you have raised your children, or it doesn't have to be about having children. So, educators that I work with who don't have children that have spent 30 years nurturing children in education,
Right.
that's the mother phase as well. Can be show up in lots of different ways in
Well,
healthcare.
yes. Well, yeah, the major aspect of motherhood is the baby before you. When you're on an airplane, put their oxygen on first and then yours, like that whole
Yep.
analogy. And that's intrinsic in mothers. We wouldn't think of taking care of ourselves at the expense of our child. So we spend an entire life or a chunk of our life living that way. As daughters, we're grown up to learn that this is expected of us.
Mhm.
And then we do this as mothers. And so then I think the realization when you're beyond that is, wait a minute, like, where's my freaking mother? Like, who's taking care of me right now? Like, I'm going through this now where my mother's living with us now. So she's here. Then I have Jack. So I'm a crone that had a baby in the middle of cronehood, which,
Yeah.
hmm. I will say, Jen, that in my raising of Gracie and Molly, I felt very compelled to do it the way I thought I was supposed to do it, right?
Yes.
Even though I
Mhm.
was older than most of my friends, I had Gracie at 38 and Molly at 40. A lot of my high school friends, their kids were, already in middle school and high school and everything
Mhm.
at that time. I absolutely have a different relationship with Jack as a mother than I
Mhm.
did. And I don't feel like a doting grandmother either. I feel
Yeah.
like if I were in a tribal community and Jack had been an orphan and he was placed in my care, he would have been placed in my care because as a crone, I was supposed to raise him. This is sort of all coming to me by
Yeah.
listening to this whole thread of the roles that we play as women. And the other piece too is we're told to like be sad about it.
Right.
Like, why do we need to be sad about this? Oh, you should probably go on an antidepressant now. Oh, well, at this time of your
Right.
life, depression's normal. And well, no, no, no. How about,
Right.
hey, wow.
I'm very excited for my children. My oldest Rose just got married. She has a fantastic job. They're starting their lives. Lucy's going to graduate this year, looking to find, the perfect job, live in the city. So it's exciting. And
Yeah,
looking at pictures of Grace
I
in
know.
Paris
I
is just
know. I know.
amazing.
I get all
Like,
wonky. Right.
mhm.
Yep.
This is exciting. And
Yes.
I want to celebrate that phase
Right.
for them. I remember being stressed out and wanting to please everybody and wanting to do it right. And at this phase in my life, what I'm doing is right.
Exactly.
It's
Yes. 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 Yes.
I don't need
Exactly.
anybody's approval to tell
Right.
me that what I'm doing is correct. And I never needed anybody's approval to tell me what I was doing was correct, but you don't get that as a young woman.
And you also don't have confidence to live that way either,
Correct.
like I would say maybe I was the same way, but trust me, I spent a lot of my life being the people pleaser and the fixer, and I better be a certain way because, and really succumbing to that kind of manipulative behavior that comes with being a woman. What publishing process did you use? Because what I'm hoping people get from this podcast interview with you too is I think we all have stories, right? And, you and I live in a very, very middle class neighborhood in a very, very regular town. We have pretty regular lives. I mean, we have little things that are not so regular, and you sat down and wrote a book, and now you can hold it in your hands and you can read the words, and you wrote them and your name is on it. And I can go on Amazon and see it. And, like there it is. So, what was your publishing process?
Well, I thought about it for a long time, what I wanted to get out of this. I am a reader. I'm a voracious reader. I read, 150 books a year. It's just what I like to do. I don't watch a lot of TV, I read. So I wanted to see what I wrote in a bookstore because I thought about just doing the Amazon Direct. But what was important to me was to be able to see it in a bookstore, to have, to wander around and pick up that book and read the back, which is what, when Dave and I go to different places, we go to bookstores, we go to libraries, and we find phenomenal stories that way. So that's what I wanted. But I didn't have an agent, nor did I have the money to pay an agent. So I looked at the hybrid process. I submitted to 3 different companies, and I actually received offers from all 3.
Nice.
One, it was much more expensive to publish than the other, so I went with the cheaper one. First, I thought it was pretty cool that my book was being published in London, but I've since realized that there's some ups and downs to that. So,
Yeah, logistical. Yeah.
yeah, so shipping alone. So the book is £10 in London and it's £15 to send it here. So that's like $40 for a
Yeah.
paperback book. So that's been a learning experience for me. So
Well, how about when I go to France in a month, I go over to London and buy a bunch of books and bring them back in my suitcase.
That would be awesome.
I totally will.
The hybrids seemed the way to go. And what they did the cover. They hired another editor to do line editing, but I'm doing the publicity. So one of the things that I know that, but the audience wouldn't, is my original career was in public relations. So I've kind of come full circle now where I've
Right.
built, a 7,000 follower Instagram page. I'm on all of the social platforms, talking to writers, talking to readers, and building that community so that by the time the book came out, which was last Thursday, was a publication day, there were people that were, where can I get your book? Where can I get your book? So I did all the publicity myself,
Right.
which turned out to be, that was something that I've always been strong with
I'm going to hire
creating.
you.
So I didn't need that from a publisher.
Yeah.
Thinking about the second book, I don't know if getting an agent is the way to go, but I definitely will look for somebody more local this time.
Yeah. So I used a company, Hybrid, Atmosphere Press. They're located in Texas, and they've been fantastic. And I sort of took all of it because I don't, I spend a lot of time on social media. I have a big, huge Facebook following. I'm having the hardest time ever building Instagram. But my problem is like you have a very specific author page.
Yep.
I don't have a specific author page because I have my podcast and blog and I have a foundation. So I'm like, do I have a third? What do I have? 50 social media profiles? Like I would rather people all just come to one and take from it what they want.
Mhm.
So I think sometimes because I don't have a niche, that I think sometimes I'm not found because I don't come up in a search, SEO lingo for social media stuff. But what Atmosphere did they did a couple of Zoom, like nationwide Zoom events where, there were like, 1,000 people on a Zoom call and we all got to talk about our books and this and that. It was the same process as you. They provided an editor. So Virginia and I and the editor worked together. Every phase of the book was dealt with. So how it works for me is if I like Gibson's has copies of Motherland because they don't mind because I'm a local author. So, they're not going to destroy them or send them back. They're happy to just let them stay on the shelf. I'm not sure what this is called, but like I didn't have to pre-buy 9 gazillion copies of the book.
Mhm.
If you wanted to buy Motherland, you would call and order it on Amazon. The order would be submitted to the company that did the book and they'd make the book and send it to you. Like you sort of can buy them, which maybe that's how yours is too.
It will be. There was a snafu with my ISBN number
That's it.
where it had been assigned to a technical journal. They had to do some work with that. So it isn't in Gibson's yet, but I've been working with Ryan Clark, who wants it to be in Gibson's. Like I have a bookmark that I haven't printed yet because I want to put their QR code so that people can go directly to them to order. Amazon's wonderful, but I'm an indie bookstore
Oh, absolutely.
woman and want to
Yeah,
support
on the
them.
website, on my Molly B Foundation website, I have a QR code so they can order it from Gibson's and then I'll go down and sign it. Like if you'd like me to sign it, just put that in your order and they call me. So I've gone down to Gibson's a bunch of times
Mhm.
to sign copies of the book. I've been on a couple of online networks, like their TV networks, like streaming apps, and they do little interviews of different books and things like this. So I've been good at saying yes to things that seem legit, but the marketing part is difficult. So are you going to have any book signings coming up? I mean,
I
we're in New
am.
Hampshire, so anyone listening, if you don't live in New Hampshire, this might not be relevant.
So the first one is going to be at the Baker Free Library in Bow, and that's on 4/20
Yeah.
at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
I had started to organize these, and then I realized that there was a little bit of a snafu with the ISBN number,
Right.
and we couldn't get it locally. So I pulled back a little bit
Yeah.
because I didn't want to schedule all of these things and then find out that people can't get the book. Because I'm already having that problem where people are saying to me, "How can I get your book? How can I get your book?" And I'm like, they have fixed that, and they told me that within the next couple days it should be available on Amazon,
Yeah.
Barnes and Nobles,
Yeah.
and then a couple Watermans or a couple places in England,
Yeah.
and then bookstores can
Then they can order them.
order it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a phenomenal bookstore in Portsmouth, Readmore, that is very women-centered that I'm really looking forward to partnering with and doing some stuff with.
Oh, nice, nice. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. You should definitely do one at Gibson's just
Oh yeah,
because, yeah,
absolutely.
that was a wonderful event because it's just so validating. At least that's how,
Yeah.
like you sit there and yeah, I was actually scared shitless. This is just so exciting. So you've got your current book and getting ready for a big launch and some book signings and
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. And then you have another one is it ready to submit
Yep,
somewhere?
it's been completely written, so the arc is all there, characters are all
Yeah.
there, and it's just having that second set of eyes go through
Yeah.
it and make sure that all the things that I'm thinking in my head are right there on the page. The title I'm going with right now is The Cursed Life of Goldilocks. It started out as young adult, and it's not young adult, and not because it's steamy or spicy is a term that I keep hearing on Instagram. It just morphed into something a little bit different. So for that one, it's two young ladies that met in elementary school. When they meet, things start happening on Friday the 13th. So there are 13 things that happen over the course of their lives. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's told through the perspective of going to a therapist. And the therapist says, how long have you been afraid of this day, this phobia of Friday the 13th? And, the main character is like, it's not a phobia,
Right.
and starts listing off the things that happen so that by the end, the therapist 100% believes and is trying to warn her about the next thing that might possibly
Right. About
happen.
happen. Yeah. Wow.
And then the family, the friend, so Goldilocks, Goldie is her first name and
Yeah.
Locke last name. At the family, their last name is Major. So as a head nod to Ursa Major,
Yeah.
they call her Baby, so Baby Bear. I've woven in
Oh
some
yeah.
of the
That's
Goldilocks
yep. Yep.
pieces, but it's real people and
Yeah.
it's very subtle. Besides the name Goldilocks,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so it's a twisted fairy tale kind of, and that's another one that I have no idea what category it would go under.
Well,
Um,
I think once you find out with whom you publish it, they'll have a better idea of how to
yeah,
categorize. When Virginia was working on Motherland, she broke her arm, and so she had like a 4 week period where she had metal pins in her hand and she had to type with one
mhm,
hand. She would wake up in the middle of the night and write, and she wrote a whole book from Molly's perspective
mhm,
about being dead but not realizing she's dead. So she's at
mhm,
the cemetery and she's watching friends and she doesn't understand why people would interact with her. And it's fantastic. And so she said, because you were paying me to write your book, this is your book. So here it is. When Virginia showed it to her editors, they were like, well, sicklet is not popular anymore. Sicklet for kids. Like,
mhm.
okay,
Yep,
well, but just because there's sickness in literature doesn't mean it has to be sicklet. You're thinking like
right.
The Fault in Our Stars and all those
Mhm,
books about, kids and dying and all that kind of stuff. The whole genre thing is fascinating to me.
mhm.
Are you going to read it? Audiobook it?
I'm not sure because that's the other piece of the Instagram process is I've met some really amazing, independent authors and then people who do voice narration as that's what they do.
Right.
And one woman reached out to me and her picture comes up and I'm like, oh, she's a crone. That's perfect. But I'm absolutely willing to do it. One of the things that I do in my classroom all the time is read to students.
Right.
Everyone loves to be read to.
Yes.
I never lost
Right.
that, when you have young kids and
Right.
you're reading to them all the time and you're enthusiastic in your voices and all
Yeah.
of that. So that never went away because I've been teaching for 20 years.
Right.
So I feel like I'd be comfortable doing it. It would just be
So,
another process.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not difficult. I went to a woman named Kate in Burlington, Vermont, just outside of Burlington, and it's called Voiceover Vermont,
Mhm.
and she was fantastic. It was really, it was really powerful, but was really good at making it. Took me 2 full days, like an 8-hour day and then like a 6-hour day
Mhm.
to read it. And I didn't have to go back. I did all right. Same thing though. I'm an educator. How many
Yeah.
years have I spent reading?
Mhm.
So, you sit in this little dark room and you're reading off a bright iPad, so you can manipulate and it's this teeny recording room with big, a big microphone and all. And
Mhm.
if something comes up, she'll say, okay, take a breath, take some water. Let's go back and reread that and slow it down a teeny bit.
Mhm.
Like she really incredible feedback because I mean, this is what she does. But what I liked about it is it really connected me to telling the story.
Yeah.
So I know for me, if I were going to listen to your book, I wouldn't want it to be somebody else. Like
Yes.
I would want to
Yep.
hear you reading it and you telling the story. So if I had any like advice to give, I would say try. She wasn't super expensive either.
Mhm.
Maybe like $1,200, which I mean, it's not cheap, but it's not $5,000.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
And that's one
so
of the things because as a educator and working with special ed students, one of the things listening to books is reading.
yeah,
So I listen to a lot of books. When
yeah,
I'm doing something, I put my earphones on and I listen to a book.
yeah,
And the parts that get me are either the robotic voices, we're not living in 2010 anymore. There's no
yeah,
need for that. Or when a book is read by either the wrong gender or the wrong age, that really bothers me as a reader. So
right,
I like hearing the
right.
authors read their own
Well,
stuff.
and no one's going to read about Molly but me. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
So there were times I cried, times I stumbled. Some of them I've listened to it, and there are times I'm like, okay, I wish I could re-record that chapter because I'm going to be critical about it.
Yep.
The times that I cry or my voice quavers, it should. Like it doesn't. Like I was afraid it would detract from it. And she said, no, you can't. I would. All right, I'll stifle my emotions. Well, you can't stifle your emotions.
Right.
But you created the story, so so much of the story that still just only exists in your head would come
Mhm.
out if you read it. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow, 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 wow. So, is there anything else that you want to add to this fantastic journey of yours? Something that we've missed, or
One of the characters that I absolutely love is Maxine. She works in New York. She had spent summers on the island at
yeah,
Peaks with a family where, mom would go there with the two kids, dad would work during the week and come back on weekends. The way I introduce her is the first time she has oysters on Peaks Island. If you've been to Peaks, there's a little cart and you can get fresh oysters, dug up that morning. It's
yeah,
amazing. So I'm just going to read a little bit
yeah, that
about
would be
that. If that's
wonderful.
okay. All
Yeah,
right. So this is in the 70s because Maxine is a crone. So it's got to be a bit ago for her.
yeah, yeah,
So Maxine ate her first oyster from Peaks Island at 4.5, while her twin Oscar munched on smart food. His tiny arm jammed to the bottom of the bag, the top crinkling loudly as it bunched into his armpit, held tight against his body. Pulling his arm out, popcorn stuck to the outer part of his hand and arm. Shoving his fist into his mouth, the bag dropped to the bench of the picnic table and popcorn rained down everywhere. Oscar, honey, you're making a mess, Mom called to him. He didn't care, giving the seagulls the hairy eyeball as they watched him. It was his popcorn, even if it had fallen to the ground, and he was not going to let the birds eat it up. Oscar was Maxine's shadow from the moment she learned to crawl, her newfound mobility temporarily setting him into a panic until he too figured out how to drag his body forward. Moving fast to catch up with her is how he learned everything, watching her do each thing first and making sure he wasn't left behind. This one time, though, he made an exception and stuck to his popcorn, a look of horror written all over his face. Mouth filled with half-chewed kernels, he let her know he was going to be his own man on this one. Yuck, he said. Maxie, those look like giant walrus boogers on a shell. You're eating somebody's snot. He stared at her in disgust, eyes wide as she slurped down another one. Gross. The adults with them, including the ones sitting at the other tables, laughed at his response and her moxie. Every eye on her as she grabbed another shell, tilted her head back, and sucked it down. She was such a little thing with her stick-like legs and arms with flaming red curls rolling down her back. Her pale skin freckled, her teeth a mess of crooked baby teeth. waiting to fall out. 5 picnic tables were stationed across from the vending cart, an old-fashioned looking thing that might have once served ice cream. The tables were topped with colorful umbrellas, each one striped white with a different hue, to keep their shaded patrons while they enjoyed their oysters. The tables themselves were right off the main road leading to the dock where the ferry landed. It was an ideal location to convince passing tourists to stop and try the delicacy. Mrs. Tremblay, a neighbor whose cottage abutted Maxine's family's property, the far end, so her address was on the next street, was sitting with her husband at the table closest to them. She called out to her mother, "Maggie, you're going to need to keep an eye on that one, you will. She's bold as brass, that little firecracker is. I love it. No one will ever tell her what to do and get away with it." "Don't I know it?" Mom replied. "Let's hope she always has Oscar as her partner in crime. He has more than a little fear of God in him, and should never do anything that left him out or scared him too much." Everyone laughed. Oscar looked at his mom. Did she call him a chicken? He thought, he still was not going to eat one of those snot shells, no matter what she said. That's not chicken, he thought. That's good common sense. So I'll stop there. But,
That's
just
awesome.
their origin story. And then, fast forward, he's living on the island with his family and she gets called to come back. She doesn't know why, but she's done with her board meeting and her stagnant job where she's watched men be promoted
Over her.
around her. And so she goes back to the island and she is sort of like the organizer of all of the details of this conference. How are we going to have enough technology so that we can include women in Zoom calls so that the women who can't get here, can't leave their jobs, are participating?
Yeah.
She's one of the, besides Buluku and Mavon, she's a pretty significant character.
What a great way to show a spirited little kid eating oysters. Because the only way I can eat oysters is at this barrel in Boston on the Boston Harbor, right on the Haymarket there. You stir it all up, you put the spicy stuff in it. They shuck them, they put the stuff in it, they stir it up, here you go, and you slurp it down. And you only taste it for a millisecond. Because if I think about it, I get,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of moxie to do that. So what a great way to show us. I could picture it all when you're reading it, probably because I was that age in those years. So, wow, that's awesome. So, do you have another character that you'd like to read a little bit about?
Oh, so Bernie. Bernie is one of the allies in the book, and he's introduced in a chapter called "Is Your Wife Available?" And that is based on that idea of the women having their rights stripped in the testaments. So this starts to happen to him. His credit card doesn't work, so he goes to the bank, and at the bank, it's chaos. There were 2 security guards, both women, standing to either side. That was when the irate man's voice reached a deep booming chord. "I want my money, you old hag." "Geez, that's a bit harsh," Bernie said to no one in particular. Blue lights flashed behind him, and a second later, Bernie was shoved out of the doorway by a cop. The cruiser parked at the door, followed by 2 more. Cops were swarming the building. "I've never noticed how many women we have on the force," Bernie thought. Seems strange they'd all be called to the bank. As he watched their progress, he looked at the bank officials, who were all women too, and the customers were all men. "What is going on?" Bernie hadn't realized he'd spoken out loud until the guy in front of him turned. "I can't get a frickin' dime of my money this morning. This is an effing circus. It is guys like that over there slowing up the system. Take your money and leave. Shut your pie hole about this hag BS. Leave that woman alone and move along. Let the rest of us have a chance. I'm late for work." All eyes turned from the arrest to McDreamy Hair to the megaphone mouth. That was the moment all hell broke loose, as if he had given the all call to start yelling, because men in line also began to shout. One was shaking his fist towards the counter, screaming nonsense about hags and witches. And I'm just going to move ahead because that's when they start to make the announcement. Effective immediately, the new law states that men are no longer allowed to manage their finances. To access any funds, you will need to return with your wife or a familiar female to help with the termination of your account unless you are seen fit to manage it by said female. All money will be held in escrow for 30 days, upon which time it'll be redistributed to women in need unless you can prove your safety status as green. If you have a familial female, please plan to return with her to transfer your account to her name. If your account was previously a joint account, your wife is now the sole named individual on the account and will be the only one with access to the money. As the male money management law, which went into effect as of midnight yesterday, states, men have proven to be too volatile to manage money and require a guardian to make informed choices. This applies to all accounts and every bank in the nation, as well as all credit cards and loans. Playing this on loop as
Yeah.
they're in the bank, and Bernie's thinking, we've shit on women so long
Right.
and we never saw it coming.
No. There's a part of
So
me that really wishes that would happen.
yeah, there's a lot in this book that I wish I could snap my fingers.
You know, they interview athletes. So they had a whole series of professional athletes who got interviewed with questions that were always asked of women. Do you feel like the cut of your uniform like interfered with your performance at all?
Mhm.
What? You know, and oh, you're wearing your hair different now. How do you think, like just all these things that have nothing to do. And
Yeah.
then the men that are beginning to change, like a tennis player who, was, oh, you're the first tennis player to ever do this. And he said, I'm the first
Yes.
male tennis player to ever do that.
Mhm.
And Serena Williams has done it 5 times. It was this, like, come on now. Wow, I have to read your book.
Just turning the scales
Yes.
on the things that we've had said to us and done
Right.
to us,
Right.
that every woman has had
Right.
said and done to us. There was
So
a commercial during Super Bowl. Now they have a blood test to check for prostate cancer. And, that's a great scientific step, but all we have is the pill. They don't invest money in women's health care to
right.
move past the pill. If you have endometriosis, you take the pill. If
Right.
you have bad periods, you take the pill. The pill is the answer for everything.
And the
And
pill is
yet,
horrible for you.
right.
Like I told Gracie, get all the hormones out of you now.
Mhm.
Just, if a tragic thing happens, we have medical facilities that can care for you immediately. And she says, Mom, it's amazing. She goes, I feel like I'm going through puberty now because she's finally, it's just like her body. So she's breaking out and all this, but every month that goes by, she feels a little bit more normal, a little bit more stable, a little bit more predictable. And then the other piece is what you just mentioned about the pill is yes, abnormal periods are a normal part of life, but they aren't normal. It's not
Right.
normal to have a big, chunky 10-gallon period. So if you have
Mhm.
one, yes, these things happen. Let's see why. Let's
Right.
not just mitigate it with a hormone suppressant. That doesn't fix it. It just,
Right. Yeah, so I flipped all of that in this book.
yeah.
And at the same time, caring for men, because I'm married to an amazing man that we have these conversations all the time. And one of the things that came up is he said to me, "Why would you go to the nurse if you have your period?" And I'm like, "Well, because it hurts." And we'd been married, I don't know, 22, 23 years at that point, and he didn't know that.
This is fantastic. I'm really excited to read it. So I'm going to zip down and get one from you when we're done. When we're done recording. But so right now, you're still in the process of. By the time this episode comes out, your book will be available. It should
Yeah.
be before the 20th of April because when everything is squared away, it'll be available at Gibson's Bookstore in Concord,
Yes.
Amazon,
Mhm.
Goodreads, Barnes and Noble, all the standard
Right.
online. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. And at some point in the quasi near future, maybe over the summer, on Audible. Do you have it on Kindle as well?
It will be, yes.
Did you dedicate it to anybody?
I did. So my grandmother was somebody I was very, very close to. So the dedication is for my grandmother, Lucienne, who taught me that caring for others is the only way to live life. She would get groceries for her neighbors. I remember stopping and picking up a crone with her when we were coming back from somewhere, someone who was carrying their groceries home. Wasn't somebody she knew, but she stopped and we gave her a ride home. And
That's where her heart
the
was.
foundation of
Yeah,
becoming a teacher, I think all of that came from her.
yeah. Have Rosie and Lucy read it?
Rose started it, and Lucy was here when I wrote it and heard me talking about who my target audience is. I don't think she has enough life experience yet. I don't think Rose does either
Right.
to
To
really
really
get
get it.
some of the pieces, and that's a good thing. So she hasn't asked because she knows that I'm really targeting Crones.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
awesome.
our story.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Live 10 more years and then you can maybe see your cronehood in the distance and then you can read the book. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, what's interesting is just as life and society changes, as expectations of women changes, I do feel we are still asked to accept whatever male-bodied people tell us to ask or
Mhm.
accept, and that bothers me to my core. But I think this whole narrative just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and more prevalent. So I'm not overly religious, but the religion I belong to declares that there will be no world peace until women and men are celebrated for what they are and seen fully equally in society. That if mankind is the body of the bird, one wing is men, one wing is women, and it can't work if they
Right.
aren't completely equal in every level, not just what is expected of them, but how they're judged, what their rights and privileges are, how they're
Mhm.
treated, and that sometimes one needs to take care of the other. And that
Mhm.
isn't a judgment or a diminishment. It's like a privilege.
Right.
So if you're the caretaker, you're underneath and you're building up the person that you're caring for, not I'm taking care of you, so I'm in charge, that whole dynamic, which is a very patriarchal dynamic. So, well, Jen, I'm wicked excited. I don't know. It's just, I think of our little street and all the cool things that have happened on it over the years. It's just fun and exciting. Thank you for coming on here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. No, I'm just excited about it. I feel like we need to help, we need to help each other. I was on a bunch of podcasts when I was going through the same thing as well. And whether or not it helped me, I don't know, but it was certainly fun to share everything that went into this process with people that I know. So as always, with my listeners, be good to yourself. So be good to yourself and buy her book and read it, especially if you're a woman of a certain age. Be good to someone else, buy a second copy of her book and give it to somebody. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.